we'll be hearing from a panel, we'll be hearing from a student, and we'll have you all back to work by 1:15 or whatever it is that you've got planned for this afternoon. So we can start the other slideshow. I think most people here know 826 Boston's mission in general, but we did update our mission statement earlier, actually last year, and I just wanted to make sure that we had a chance to share the updated mission statement with all of you. So just wait for that to pop up on the screen. Meanwhile, welcome to people that have just come in. We're going to get started. Just a sec. Thanks, Lonnie. So 826 Boston is a nonprofit writing, tutoring, and publishing organization where students in grades K through 12 and beyond can share their stories, amplify their voices, and develop as leaders in school and in life. We also want to always start by acknowledging through our land acknowledgement statement that the land where 826 Boston's center, offices, and partner schools are located is on the original homelands of the Massachusetts tribe. We honor and pay our respects to the ancestral bloodline of the Massachusetts tribe and their descendants who are still inhabiting the land in which we work and serve today. So what we'll cover today, we have a packed agenda, as I mentioned. After our welcoming remarks, we will jump right into a very exciting panel who I am thrilled, having just met all of them briefly, to hear more from. And after the panel, we'll hear a student testimonial, and I'll walk through what's in store for 826 Boston when it comes to STEM literacy moving forward. Just a quick housekeeping item. As you see, we'll be using slides and video during the presentation, so we recommend to use the side-by-side gallery view. So if you haven't done this part of Zoom before, you go up to the top where it says view and then pull down to side-by-side gallery. Awesome. So the first thing I want to do is hand it over to Mark Foster, one of our awesomely supportive and STEM-focused board members, to just say some opening remarks.
Hello, my name is Mark Foster, a proud member. Jenna, can you hear me? Jenna, can you hear me?
I can hear you. You sound great.
Great. Awesome. My name is Mark Foster, a proud member of 826 Boston's board. Thank you for taking time out from your busy day to be with us. Special thanks to the host committee who reached out to coworkers and friends in Greater Boston and beyond to join us. I've spent my entire career working in STEM fields, 15 years in high tech and 20 years in biotech, and I've always been struck by how big a role writing plays. It's sometimes possible to start off right out of school by leaning on pure technical and scientific skills. But even at an early stage, trying to get anything done with any level of complexity requires buy-in from coworkers, and that requires good written and verbal communications. And that's why we're all here today. 5 years ago, building upon 2 excellent science-focused publications at the primary and middle school levels, 826 Boston set out to address the STEM writing needs of Boston public school students in a more structured way. We talked with founders and senior managers in tech and biotech-focused companies in Greater Boston, and were astonished by the unanimity of their responses. They all stressed that good written communications are critical to the success of their organizations, and that writing is a huge unmet need. One luminary biotech founder said, "We're hiring some of the best young scientists in the country, but many of them can't write, and that puts a serious brake on our productivity." Since then, we've been piloting and relationship building, and we're proud to share our progress today. On that note, I'll hand off to my esteemed colleague, Francie Latour, 826 Boston's Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and formerly coordinator of the Broad Diversity Initiative at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. Francie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's great to see you. It's great to see everyone. I'm so excited and thankful for each and every person who is here, and cannot wait to introduce you to 3 amazing Black women who each in their own domains is championing STEM. So as Mark said, STEM is a huge educational priority right now, for good reason. We need future leaders to take on our biggest challenges, like the pandemic, climate change, and increasing income inequality. And to solve these problems, we really need the voices, lenses, and perspectives of communities of color, which are the very communities that have been historically excluded from STEM, and also the communities that bear the heaviest burden of our global issues. We've always needed these voices. And I love that we're having this conversation during Black History Month, because I think one of the most important things that Black History Month asks us to contemplate is how much more Black people and all marginalized people could have contributed to the human family up to this moment if the barriers that exclude them had been removed. And so, as sophisticated as we believe today's scientific advancements to be, contemplating these unrealized contributions means recognizing how much exclusion in STEM fundamentally diminishes the world of science, and the power and influence that each of us has to lift these barriers that still exist in STEM. 826 Boston is dedicated to literacy and students of color, and we offer programs that affirm students as future leaders in STEM. It's one of the things that makes me so, so proud of being a part of the 826 Boston team. Our unique niche connects critical thinking and communication. And our approach not only brings more students to STEM, it supports the student voice, storytelling, and problem framing that students need to advance systemic change. And with that, I will introduce our panelists. We are joined by Courtney Adams, Education Manager at Central Square Theater, which is now presenting Young Nerds of Color. We're also joined by Monica Hall Porter, Faculty Development Coordinator and Science Instruction Consultant, and Associate Professor of Instruction in Biology at the University of Texas at Austin. And we are joined by Marisha Donald, Associate Director of Early Career Talent at Vertex Pharmaceuticals Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Business Partner. Okay, so we are going to get started. To keep us on time, we may not have time for every panelist to ask every question, but we'll try to squeeze as much in as we can. So this is for Monica and Marisha. What are the most important ways that writing and communication enter into your roles?
Into my role, I can open. Thanks so much, Francie. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. And to answer your question, what are the ways that writing and communication most importantly figure into my role? I would say that first in my training as a scientist, and then when I took those skills and translated them from the educational setting, so from higher ed to a corporate setting, I think the most important thing that I carried forward with me in terms of writing and literacy, where STEM is regarded as clarity. Folks don't understand what it is that you are wanting to communicate. It's very difficult to motivate them to help you solve the problems that you're trying to solve, whether those are business problems or scientific problems, or business problems that are supporting scientific problems. If people don't understand what it is that you're trying to cause, they have very little motivation to support you in solving the problem or causing the impact that you'd like to cause.
Thank you. Monica, go for it.
First, before I answer, I'd like to say thank you for having me today. And what my thoughts on that question about the most important ways that writing and communication enter into my role really hinge on the fact that I do have communication and very important communications with two very different audiences in my role. So as a professor, I communicate directly with students, and that includes conveying concepts, many of them difficult concepts, but then also providing feedback on their progress toward achieving course goals for any given course. And so that is a set of communication and writing skills that hinges on the ability to convey information, but also being a motivator in making them understand that incremental progress is essential to their educational trajectory. And there's some behavioral science wrapped up in that as well. So being able to communicate the science as it's centered in behavioral science is a unique communication skill set. So that's one important thing. And then I also communicate directly with faculty, thinking about various initiatives to promote faculty or promote student success through faculty initiatives. And so this idea of getting faculty to engage in those initiatives really hinges on the ability to communicate how those initiatives will be beneficial to both, to all parties involved. And so being able to communicate mutual benefit in both verbal communication and written communication is important in that role.
Thank you so much. Next question. Courtney, this is bearing on your role as an educator and educating through the arts. The play, Young Nerds of Color, involved taking hundreds of hours of recorded interviews with scientists of color, students of color, and advocates for scientists and students of color in STEM, and distilling those into a script. And I'm wondering, as an educator, which of those voices spoke most loudly to you, specifically in terms of the need for STEM literacy, and how you translate that into your role as an educator?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I'm also just going to add a little known fact about my background, which is that before I became an artist and an educator, I was an engineer. And so I have a love for science that also runs deep, in addition to my love for youth. And it all kind of comes together with this. To me, when we're talking about STEM literacy and about this play in particular, it's all about supporting young folks to see how all the different ways they can have an impact on the world is really what it comes down to, right? And making sure that like all areas are open to them, or at least they should be. And how can their creative ideas and questions come to exist in a public space and come to have impact on their communities and their world? And so, you know, getting at the second part of your question first, when we're talking about how does STEM literacy fit into what we're doing, is because being able to read and write about STEM issues, I mean, is a justice issue. Everyone needs to be able to be fluent in this information so that everyone's voices can be heard and be part of the process. And then theater for us is a vehicle to have these conversations and to share stories. As far as the stories that speak to me personally, I love kind of the origin stories. You know, what even inspired you? What was the funky idea, or who was the person who was the inspiration that made you want to even think about doing science? And then who supported you on your journey to being a scientist? I find those stories really powerful and inspiring as well. And that I hope young folks may also connect and think like, oh, I had an idea like that too, but it didn't occur to me that I could become an astrophysicist because of it, that kind of thing. I love those stories.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that leads really well into my next question, which is really about belonging, and role models, inspirational people in the lives of young people in STEM are really critical in developing that sense of belonging. So my next question, actually really for any of you, we know that belonging is a major barrier to broadening STEM participation. And belonging isn't the kind of thing that you can create yourself, right? You can't just say, well, I belong, right? It's conferred on you by a given community. And so I'm wondering if any of you would like to share more about what are those barriers to broadening STEM participation that relate to belonging? And what role does the institutional culture of STEM need to play in increasing the sense of belonging for BIPOC scientists?
So I'll take that one. And it's mainly because one of the things that I've become interested in as an educator is the use of something called universal design for learning that really focuses on something on multiple means of expression in learning. And one of the things I will say, when we think about designating who belongs in STEM, I think one of the ways that we think about who belongs and we delineate who belongs is how people demonstrate STEM literacy. And I think one of the things that has to happen in institutions is we need to broaden our awareness of the multiple ways that STEM literacy shows up in different cultures. And I think that that as we broaden that awareness of the multiple ways STEM literacy shows up in different cultures, we understand that not everyone, of course, has the same experience, but their cultural experiences have shaped the way that they demonstrate their STEM literacy. And as we can identify elements of STEM literacy in different people from different walks of life, I think that, and the ability to do that will actually broaden the arc of participation, because we'll understand that people actually know and experience more than they are acknowledged to know and have experienced as they're coming from their different walks of life.
Absolutely.
I'd like to sort of contribute to that.
Yeah.
I think that, I really appreciate what Monica said around how folks show up differently in their demonstration of STEM literacy. I can say that my first introduction into chemistry, my mother was a school bus driver, my father was a warehouse manager. I did not grow up in a home full of scientists. However, my first introduction to chemistry was baking cakes, right? So if you don't add enough flour, if you don't add enough leavening, certain recipes, if you don't put the acid, what will happen? And you could be a chemist in the kitchen, right? And you can start to diagnose, or start to troubleshoot what's going on with this, essentially a chemical equation here when you're adding together all of these ingredients and you're seeing the outcome. So I think that folks show up differently, as she said, to the space of STEM and demonstrating different literacy. And I think it benefits us all to see what exposure folks have had, and then to translate that and to tie it to those sort of canonical learnings that we sort of index on as what we all regard universally to be a STEM literate curriculum, something to that extent. But also I'd say that a barrier to belonging in STEM we talk about this a lot in my day-to-day work, but there are so many micro messages when you walk into any space that's been gatekept, right? And so I think there is a lot of gatekeeping in STEM early in, either as early as middle school. They start, there are classes that start to track students for what will ultimately be AP chemistry by the time they get to 10th, 11th grade. But they're being tracked as early as the 6th grade. So, that gate has been opened or shut to them to learn things based on, maybe a bad hormonal day in the 6th grade or a bad hormonal 3 months. We've all had them. So I think that's one barrier to belonging, is this early gatekeeping. Another barrier is resource. I can tell you that in my experience, just lowering the barriers to resources to things like graphing calculators, and where we can't lower the barriers, letting folks know where the access points are. Part of my personal story is when I was taking calculus and advanced chemistry in high school, I could not afford a graphing calculator for the first 3 months. Like we had to save for this, and I didn't realize during the summer that this is going to be something that I needed. And this is not stuff you can do on the back of your hand or on a pad of paper. And so, I was struggling mightily, and I was not aware that you could check out a graphing calculator in the library. I was not aware that the teacher might want to loan one to me. And I did not feel like I had access to the teacher because I had a deference to authority to make a demand that somebody provide me the resources I need to succeed. And so those things, that young folks who are maybe not even equipped to advocate for themselves face are some early blocks to belonging in STEM, and they can really shut people out. Those experiences that you have in the first 10 to 15 years of your life in STEM can turn a career for you.
Listening to you share that is really making me think about some of the, I guess what we call the unwritten curriculum, right? The sort of cultural pieces that don't get spoken, but they're a really important part of the socialization in STEM. In working at the Broad Institute, I remember specifically every summer we would have a number of students from historically Black colleges and universities. And speaking to the issue of respect, many of them would just call someone doctor, right? Dr. Biren, Dr. Schreiber. And, the scientists would say, oh no, I'm just Stuart, I'm just Eric, I'm just Bruce. And, it feels so silly that you're, calling us doctor. And that was like a cultural disconnect that none of these students anticipated, and that had a big impact on them, right? Because that cultural signal of respect is really important within the world of HBCUs, including in STEM. And here they were encountering a culture that on the surface felt like really informal, like, hey, you're Kayla and I'm Stuart and we're all, but underneath that, they were feeling alienation, like at the same time. I don't know if that's something that any of you have ever encountered, but that really struck me.
Absolutely. When I arrived here to graduate school, I remember I was talking to the administrator in the office, and I was so grateful to her because she had done so much for me. They help you to onboard, and I had to write her to ask her, where would I, think about living and what kind of bus T-Pass did I need and so on. And I remember saying, thanks so much, Ms. Cabral. And she said, oh no, my name is Marcia. And I thought, like, I can't be around here calling grown people by their first names. And I was a grown person myself. Like, what are y'all doing here? And I'm not, my family's Southern, but I'm from California, but it's cultural, right? Mm-hmm. So this could be something happening down the street from you in a little cultural pocket of someone's home. This is the way that they've been groomed. And it is, it's different when you walk into an institution.
Absolutely, yes. Okay, so you have a magic wand. When it comes to achieving a more diverse STEM community, what is the first change you want to make with that wand? And this is for any of you.
All right, I have a change that I would make. When we're thinking about diversifying STEM, a lot of times we kind of separate issues into pipeline and pond. Okay, so what's happening in the progression, in the preparation for a STEM career is the pipeline, and then the environment that you're placed in once you get to that STEM career is the pond, right? And so, for example, if you think of K through 12 to university, the K through 12 environment would be the pipeline, and then the university would be the pond, right? And then if it were university to job, the university would be the pipeline, and the career would be the pond. And so one of the things I would look at changing, we've done so much about the pipeline. We've poured so much money into programs for students. We've poured money into preparation. I would focus on the pond. because you can have students who are prepared to persist in the pond. However, if the pond is not hospitable, you'll still have failures. And I think that we have to really focus on the environment that we're placing people into. And I'll just give an example that comes from my experience. Several years ago, I went to an event at a university in upstate New York. And this university was trying to figure out ways to diversify their faculty. And when they asked, what can we do? I said, well, you need to look at the environment that these professors are going to be placed in, because everywhere I drove around this town, I saw Confederate flags in and around the area. I was like, this is not this university campus itself might be a welcoming pond, but the area around it is not. And so I think we really have to work on the pond in all spaces.
I love
That
that.
resonates strongly. I can tell you when I was looking to go to graduate school, I'm not going to name the university, but it was a university in the South. And, I was in constant communication with my family about, what am I thinking? Where might I go? And I remember being in this university in the South, and, we're on our tour, and they show you their very best. The best of what the town has to offer, all the best grocery stores and restaurants and all the best the university has to offer. And I remember saying, I know this is a diverse city by reading demographics, but where are all the Black people? They said they're in their neighborhood. And I said, okay, up north for me. Because I don't want to be in, quote, their neighborhood, right? I wanted to be a part of, right? And so that resonates very strongly for me when you say the pond is not hospitable. And I also think that we do so much to prepare people and to give them, skills we tell them are going to help them to succeed. And we open some gates and then close others. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, you might need some more polish in navigating sticky environments, or you might need some more, polish in presentation or facilitation. I have to tell you, as a Black woman who earned a PhD in New England in a hard science, I have navigated plenty of sticky conversation. I have been in very many spaces where I've been the only person who looks like me or sounded like me. And so people come into these conversation settings and environments with a preconception, as always, of what a scientist is, does, looks like, sounds like, and where they're from. And that becomes a barrier for folks' success. And so the thing that I would move with my magic wand would be those types of gatekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
That actually connects to what I was going to say too. There's so much mythology around all this that when we're thinking about what some of the barriers are for young folks, some of it is just looking around and not seeing themselves in science anywhere. That there's so many large and small reminders. I can't tell you how many different rooms I've walked into, whether it's lecture halls or hospital hallways or whatever it is, where it's just white man after white man all along the walls. And there's, to what you were just saying, Marisha, this expectation of what a scientist is, supposed to look like, or even what kinds of sciences women or people of color are supposed to be good at or interested in, or any of that stuff. All that mythology needs to just, if I have my magic wand, will be gone, right? So that every time you walk into one of those rooms or one of those hallways, there would just be the full spectrum of humanity all over the walls. Because if we had reached that point, then so many other things would have had to have changed to have actually reached that. That would be amazing.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. I am going to hand it back to Jenna for the next part of our program.
Thank you so much. It was an excellent panel, and I feel like we were only taking the tiniest bite of the apple. I wanted to keep going, but we'll make sure that this conversation keeps going. I think that one thing I wanted to spotlight in this presentation is our science fair boot camp, because I think it actually talks a little bit about where these barriers and gatekeepers are happening. So Science Fair Boot Camp, for those for whom this is a new program, it's also a new program for 826 Boston. We piloted it last year. It's a chance for us to pair our volunteers with students who are participating in the Boston Public Schools citywide science and engineering fair. And it is a really, I think we can probably all remember back to the science fair. It's kind of stressful. No matter how great your experiment might be that you've toiled on, probably the biggest element and the biggest unmet need is telling the story of it and feeling comfortable and confident doing it. 826 Boston is really focused on the confidence of student voices. And so when we think about those early science experiments that help us feel belonging or that help us feel confident that we're on a trajectory that we might want to pursue as a career, I think the science fair is so important. So it kind of goes without saying that we'd rather hear what a student thought of it. 826 Boston is definitely, our students are our best ambassadors. So we're gonna queue up a little video of a science fair boot camp participant from last year. I just also wanted to preface it by saying that this program was really successful in its pilot year. So we worked with 18 students in its first year, just as a test run, and 15 of them won in their divisions. So we think we're onto something. We'll hear a little bit from Chelsea Bateman, a student at Boston Latin School, to hear it from the source, and then I'll be back with you in a sec.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Bateman, and I'm in the 7th grade at Boston Latin School. I'm 13 years old. Well, I've always really loved animals, and when I realized that how animals live together is an actual part of science called ecology, I was just hooked. And so a lot of my projects are actually about animals. So I really liked, especially my helper. He didn't only show me how to improve my writing or my analysis of the data I collected, but he also told me how I could build on my project and relate it to real world and current events. Well, my science fair project was on humans and how owning dogs affected stress levels, especially in the pandemic when there were so many reasons to be stressed, and I was wondering if owning a dog could help you or make you less stressed. So yes, I have. My science project this year is actually about an invasive species of snails called Chinese mystery snails in a lake in New Hampshire, and we wanted to see if there was a way we could effectively estimate the numbers of the snails in the lake. So that's what I'm working on this year. Well, STEM has helped me to do a number of things. So if I do have a career in STEM, I'll certainly have a lot of knowledge about it, how to write papers, how to do a science project. And also, if I wanted to pursue a career in writing, I've learned so much just on writing my conclusion essays and my abstract on how to write better and more effectively.
Awesome. So yeah, I think you've got to be in the room to really feel the magic of Science Fair Boot Camp, but I think that was a little taste. Science Fair Boot Camp is happening next week at 826 Boston. It's during February vacation week. We'll be pairing tutors with students who are, writing those conclusions, practicing their presentations, and they'll be partnered with STEM specialists who have the experience to pose the tough questions that the judges at the science fair will be asking, and really let students use their internal, experiences and stories to share what they've learned. We want this program to grow and be even more successful over the years. And so that is, I hope, where you come in. And one way that you can help with 826 Boston Science Fair Boot Camp and other STEM programs is to support our work with a financial contribution. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. You can use the QR code on the screen. We'll also provide a link to a giving page in the chat. shout out to the STEM focused QR code here with my dino friend in the middle. We also have ways that you can give that are not financial. So we're always looking for STEM fluent volunteers in our program. Next week is short notice, I know, for Science Fair Boot Camp, but our after school writing and tutoring program that we run in Eggleston Square and virtually is always looking for STEM fluent tutors because students are working on calculus and physics, and they need folks to not only understand the writing, but also to understand the science behind it too. So if you're interested in donating your time, you can email volunteer@826boston.org. We're also just always interested to hear your thoughts and perspectives. So I'll be sending out kind of a thank you email after we get that video ready for you. And please let me know, give us some feedback on other ways and other partnerships that we can use to move forward our STEM literacy work. I want to go out on a bit of some inspiring writing, because that's the 826 Boston way. So I'm going to turn it over to Courtney again, who's going to provide a short monologue from Young Nerds of Color. And we'll put more information in the chat too about the play, so you can find out how to get tickets and everything.
Great. So I think one thing that maybe could be more explicitly stated is that this play was created entirely based on interviews with many, many folks in the field. And it's all, the playwright describes herself as just an arranger of their words. And so this is an excerpt from someone who's working in a university setting, a science-oriented university, and talking about what her experience is. So the work that I do now is in helping young people find and follow their passions in science and engineering. We focus on supporting underrepresented minorities, students from low-income backgrounds, and who will be the first in their families to graduate college. And every program culminates with a day of students presenting hands-on science and engineering projects. I really love seeing the presentations. I love seeing and sharing what they've learned. And that's a really, really special time. It's a short period of time, and they come up with these amazing solutions to problems that I think really surprises them, discovering what their contribution can be with a little bit of support and focus. And I tend to be the one that gives parting words. And I say, you do, in fact, belong in STEM. You are very bright, very talented, and can accomplish anything that you put your minds to. You're going to shine. You're going to shine.
I'd love to hear some audible responses. That was amazing. If you want to come off mute and give some applause, that was thrilling and very appropriate. I think the shining and the confidence that's hopefully what's coming through in 826 Boston's programs too. So thank you all so much for being here. If you want to stay on, the call, I will hang out in the Zoom if anyone has questions or just wants to keep chatting. But we did promise we would return you to your regularly scheduled day. And thank you in advance for everyone who is deciding to contribute